Pakistan is very worried about India's plan to renegotiate or cancel the Indus Waters Treaty. This could change the political landscape of South Asia. The treaty is now facing its biggest threat after surviving decades of wars and tension. India's signing of the Indus Waters Treaty in the 1960s was a useful diplomatic reminder of the past. Interestingly, one of India and Pakistan's strange peace products has been able to live in some form or another through times of political strife. India's most recent decision to break a treaty has caused a lot of doubt, and the future of one of the most important water-sharing agreements in the world is now up in the air. It is a historic move that has erased the sanctity of the treaty and started a new era in ties between India and Pakistan. It is also likely to make regional water security less stable. To make sense of what India is likely to do, we would have to look back at the thought and purpose behind the Indus Waters Treaty. Let's dive in. India and Pakistan did something very interesting in 1960. They both signed a treaty called the Indus Waters Treaty. The goal was to end a long-running argument over who should use the Indus River. To give you some background and a quick geography lesson, the new border between India and Pakistan split more than just land and people. It also split the rivers that fed Pakistan's fields. The main rivers that run into the Indus all started in India and ended up in Pakistan. India could really mess up Pakistan's water supply if they controlled the flow. The Indus Waters Treaty was finally signed by both countries after almost 9 years of talks. The World Bank stepped in as a mediator in case things went badly. As long as India didn't use the rivers too much upstream, Pakistan got the western rivers, Indus, Jhelum and Chenab, and India got the eastern rivers, Ravi, Beas and Sutlej. Despite wars and constant tensions between the two countries, the treaty stayed in place for many years. It was kind of like a sign of unity between two angry ex-spouses who could barely agree. But after a horrible terrorist attack on Indian tourists in Pahalgam, Kashmir, India did something very notable. It chose to put the treaty on hold until Pakistan made it clear it would no longer back terrorism. For starters, it doesn't mean India can turn off the taps and stop Pakistan from getting water. What really changes is how important information is shared. India has to share information about rivers, like storm predictions and water levels, because of the treaty. This is important for Pakistan to be able to plan ahead. India could conceal this information, though, if it fails to follow through on the treaty. This would make it more likely for Pakistan to be hit by sudden floods or droughts. India would also not have to release a certain amount of water when it's dry. That means it can store more water upstream without having to ask Pakistan first. What could be wrong with that? Actually, there are two things. First up, farming. The water from the Indus River flows through Pakistan, which has one of the biggest irrigation systems. This water is needed to water about 16 million hectares or 80% of Pakistan's farms. About 90% of it is used for irrigation. This is where the catch is. The Tarbela Dam on the Indus River already has very little water in it. Pakistani farmers might not be able to plant important crops like cotton and paddy on time if India holds back. For crops to grow, they need water. Without it, the cotton output might go down even more. Of Pakistan's exports, over 60% are cotton, so this is a big deal. It loses 8.5% of its GDP, and both of those are already difficult. It could also have a big impact on Pakistan's huge cloth industry. India already controls 65% of the world basmati trade, leaving Pakistan with 35%. This means that Pakistan could lose some of its basmati rice market share to India. That gap could get even bigger if Pakistan's rice crop fails. After that, there is power. Pakistan does rely on coal a lot, but the country wants to double green energy. A lot of that power comes from hydroelectricity, which is the main green power source in the country. The rivers Indus and Jhelum are an important source of power. Large hydropower plants like Tarbela, Neelam, Jhelum, and Mangla depend on this water flow. If the water flow slows down, it could make it harder to make electricity and raise the price of electricity even more. In the sugar and cotton industries, and raise the price of electricity even more. This is bad news for Pakistan. Pakistan's power industry is already under a lot of water. $9 trillion of circular debt, which meant that distribution companies couldn't get customers to pay their costs. This led to a cycle of unpaid bills all along the supply chain and a mess with the sector's finances. Keeping the lights on has cost Pakistan 150% more. Since 2021, energy costs have risen. Since people in Pakistan are very price conscious, another spike could be dangerous. A 1% rise in prices can make people spend 0.3% less. Also, the power sector is very weak and depends a lot on loans from outside groups like the IMF. Nepal's total debt to other countries has grown, while foreign exchange stocks have dropped to just $8 billion, which is barely enough to cover imports for 1.5 months. The country spent $130 billion. That's right, any problem in the power sector could quickly become a major economic problem. Water problems could lead to a bigger economic mess too. However, that is only one side of the story. They also happen in India if you look at it from a different view. As you can see, the Indus Waters Treaty doesn't actually allow for one-sided stoppage. Both governments must agree on any changes. If India decides to leave on its own, it is pretty much acting outside the rules. It might also affect the economy in several ways. In a good way, farmers in Jammu Kashmir and Ladakh might gain. India can now use water from the western rivers to water about 13 lakh acres in these areas. Only about half of that has been used so far. India could farm more land if it builds new canals, reservoirs, and water delivery systems. For crops like apples, walnuts, and saffron, that's a big number. Farmers have been having a hard time lately because cheaper saffron from Iran is filling the market. Things have gotten worse for even apples. That is, more land that is farmed with lots of water could change the game. India could also speed up its projects to build electricity dams on the western rivers. India's renewable energy output could be increased without having to worry about Pakistan's objections. Dams like Kishanganga and Ratla could be redesigned to hold more water, but things aren't always easy. It takes a lot of money and years of work to build more storage facilities. India also can't just keep watering the western rivers to keep Pakistan from getting water. The river's huge amounts of water could flood India's upper areas as well. Also, building more dams could hurt the fragile ecosystems in the Himalayas. It could change the way rivers move naturally and possibly make climate problems even worse. There is still another issue: Chinese. India might set a bad example if it goes against the treaty's rules. This could come back to bite them. That's because India is further down the Brahmaputra and other rivers that come from China. By suspending the treaty on its own, it may be giving China the wrong message. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPC project, is worth many billions of dollars. It includes the Indus Cascade, which is a set of buildings planned on the Indus. And if India gets in the way, China could respond by making it harder to share details about the Brahmaputra. However, India has some problems. In addition to hurting its infrastructure, ending the treaty could also hurt its reputation around the world. Especially since it wants to join the UN Security Council and host G20 meetings. Countries nearby like Bangladesh, Nepal, and China might be wary of such a move. China, which is upstream on the Indus and Sutlej rivers, could respond by building a lot of dams of its own. The World Bank has called for dialogue between the two sides, but Pakistan, saying that it is in a weaker situation, wants a third party to settle the dispute. Since 2022, India hasn't held a meeting of the Permanent Indus Commission and won't work with the Permanent Court of Arbitration. This points to a tougher stance. If talks fail, India could change the flow of water or, in the worst case, physically stop it. This would take engineering that has never been seen before. It is Pakistan's very existence that is at risk. If you cut off the water supply, the amount available per person would drop below the important 1,000 cubic meters, making it very scarce. Energy and food shortages could make the already unstable government even less stable. Extremist groups could take advantage of the instability, making the area even less safe. India doesn't have a lot of infrastructure, so if floods happen, it will kill a lot of people and force millions to move. The causes of climate change make things more urgent. There are already problems with the Indus because of melting mountains and unpredictable rains. By 2030, Pakistan might not have enough water to sustain itself. The Indus Waters Treaty wasn't designed with joint crisis management in mind because it was made before climate change was known. Experts say that treaty change should include sharing data and working together to handle disasters. India might gain short-term power by using water as a tool, but it comes at a huge cost in terms of human rights and diplomacy. Signed in 1960 with World Bank mediation, the Indus Waters Treaty allocated 3 eastern rivers, Ravi, Beas, and Sutlej, to India and 3 western rivers, Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab, primarily to Pakistan. So that's how stepping back from the treaty could throw a curveball not just for Pakistan but for India too. The ripple effects are still unfolding, and we'll have to wait and see how this all plays out in the days to come. Until then, thank you for watching. See you in the next video.